Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. This is your hosts. These are your hosts, David and Mac. How you doing, Mac?
I'm doing good. How have you been?
Where have I been?
Hi. Well, how have you
Oh,
been and where have you been?
how have I been? Okay, I've been good and terrible in their turn. So that's gonna be the case for a little while, but I'm still managing to get work done at work, so there's that. I am currently working on our new company logo,
Mm.
so I'm creating that, and I'm also creating our new product branding.
Oh, so you're super busy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been knee deep in graphic design apps, and it's not my bailiwick, and so
What about
it's
the surgery that you were supposed to get?
I got it. I got it, and it's been great and terrible as surgeries are, and that's. But it was a first round of surgery because they had to get rid of the hardware in order to get rid of the knee or do anything else that they might do to the knee. So the hardware's gone, and that's healing up, and when that's healed, then they'll do the next thing.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Hope
there are
you
reasons they
recover.
didn't do it all at once, but
Yeah.
I would have preferred it all at once. But
Yeah,
there
like
are,
getting your wisdom teeth out.
yeah,
Like I got all of them at the same all of them same day.
yeah.
It's like yeah. Um
It's terrible, but you only have to do it once.
yeah, you only have to go through it once.
So, at any rate, I am here, and we are going to do a show which involves a conversation and not a video. So that couldn't possibly last long, right?
No, I don't think it will.
No, great. Then I'm going to take that as full fledged permission to do a short at the beginning of the show. So, hello, hello, and shorts. Don't ask where this came from. I saw it. I didn't have time to do it. I thought that it might be interesting to discuss at the front of this. So, 3 minutes, short. Christian Post headline: Seek prayer. That's seek, Sikh, seek prayer at RNC. Why, as an evangelical, I have no problem with this. And this is an opinion piece. So, at the Republican National Convention, they kicked it off with a religious prayer, obviously. Religious prayer, kind of redundant there. But of course, they kicked it off with a prayer because they see themselves as fundamentally religious, I think. Of
Huh.
course, the Democrats do it too. I understand that. But it's, I think, it's a testimony to how religious and not secular these parties actually are, and why we have so much problem with
Well,
doing a secular government. But hang on, let me get
okay, okay,
to.
okay. All right,
I'll
get to the
get.
short.
You'll
All
get
right,
in.
all right,
You'll get
all
in.
right.
I'm just baiting the bear. So the Sikh prayer led off the party, and you might think, wait a minute, but what about conservative Christians? You're gonna pray on a committee convention that is running off of a conservative Christian platform. It's part of their platform. And Sikh, not Christian. And his prayer started off with, I'm looking for the exact quote, but I know it. So, Dear Wagaharu, Dear Wahagaru, that's, I think it's Wahagaru. Dear Wahagaru, the one true God. And his prayer continued from there. So, my take: I have a new favorite god. All hail Wahagaru, the one true God, as promoted by the Republican Party. There you go. Have at it.
Uh, yeah, I was just gonna say that when you and I talk about prayer in schools, and you're always saying, like, um, Christians want prayer in schools, and I always tell you, no, we don't. Well, at least a lot of us don't, and that's because when someone says prayer, they're thinking of it in the sense of um, it's not specific to Christian prayer. It's not Christianity prayer. It's all prayer. So I know you've seen this clip of this guy who was praying in Congress, and he ends by saying "Amen" and "A women." Right? You've seen that?
No,
You've not seen that?
no.
You should look it up. Um, so he starts by praying nebulously. So he's just praying in general, and he's saying, "We thank you for this. We thank you for that." And then he says, "Amen" and "A women." And it was this big thing where it's like, what are you doing? So there's a sense in which prayer can just be like a performance or a show. Um, and in a very real sense, that's kind of what the Republican Party is going for whenever they have these, uh, what do you call them? Publicity stunts, because that's what this is. Even if they did have someone there pray Christian prayer, like you just know they're doing that to get votes. And I think, like, as a society, we've gone to the point where we're like, at least most of us should be able to see that, see right through it, and be like, yeah, they're not doing this because they have a true devotion to the God they're praying to. They're doing it because they want votes. And in this case, and this is my final point, um, they had the Sikh guy up there because they want to show that their party isn't just for white people. Because you see, like, we have colored people too praying. We have Indians, we have Hindus, we have Buddhists, we have Sikhs, we have Muslims. We're so tolerant. That's the image they're trying to project. And like Hulk Hogan was speaking, and then we have Amber Rose speaking. It's like it's just marketing, pretty much. So like, I wouldn't personally tell someone like, hey, if you want to look for Christian values, look for them at the Republican Party or the Republican National Convention, because you're not going to find it there. You're just going to find lots of Pharisees, and it's very disheartening. But it's also pretty entertaining if you just take it lightly.
Okay, so you're no fun. I was actually going to say most of that. So, whatever.
Yeah, if it was on the boards, we would be fighting though.
Well,
In part, if we were talking about it on the forum.
all hail Wahaguru, the one true God. That's all I can say, man. I don't know. That's, so
I mean,
here
it's pretty hollow. I
it
mean,
is. It's so hollow, but I think there is some strategy there. I think the strategy, and by the way, it might work in court because I suspect this is. If there's anyone smart enough to think this far ahead, I think it's something that they can bring to court when they are accused of all of these prayer in school board meetings and prayer in school things, and it's only Christians there. And people are saying, look, this is just a de facto Christian privilege that these people are fighting for. And they can say, hey, wait a minute. In our own convention, we had a Sikh praying to a different God, you see? So
yeah. And even
I
looking at this article, that you mentioned on the Christian Post, like the guy saying, "Oh, it's a good thing because it opens up the opportunity to have a true talk about." Like, I don't understand what he's trying to say, but
that is so BS. If in the Old Testament, the Jewish God said, yeah, you can't actually you know honor other gods To do so would kind of be a death penalty offense. So this idea that, oh no, we pray to false gods here so that we can have the conversation about why they're false. That's I don't understand that at all.
Yeah.
There's no form of Christianity, even liberal Christianity when I was doing liberal Christianity, where that would have made sense.
Actually, in liberal Christianity, it does make sense. I live close to a church where they pretty much put up a sign that says, like all faiths are welcome to pray here. Like it says, it doesn't matter if you have, even if you're an atheist, you could go in and pray, whatever, or be spiritual and do your stuff.
Sounds like
It
United Universalist, a UU church. That's what it
No,
sounds like.
here's the funny thing. It's a very traditional looking church. Like they still have the cross on the steeple, and it doesn't have like a name like Methodist or Unitarian thing. It just has the sign that says all are welcome here to pray, and then it's just like I don't know what goes on in there. Maybe I'll go in one day and see what happens, but it's pretty much everything is valid in here. There's no red tape around whoever wants to pray, whoever doesn't want to pray. And that's what the culture thinks when they think religion. It just thinks include everyone to do their thing. There's no like red tape. There's no line between no, you're serving a different God and we believe different things. Like there's no room to disagree with someone else who has religious beliefs. It's everyone's all in, all the same.
Well, let me tell you, outside of a UU church, and I've done some pretty liberal churches. I've never been to a church that would have gone for that. In calling themselves a Christian church, so it would have to that would have to be a stipulation. UU is not really a Christian church, so it's just not. They don't even really try to be, in my opinion. But this is the Republican National Convention, and we know what they are. We know what their platform is. You can just read their platform. And so, publicity stunt or not, it's kind of offensive even to me. It's that they are praying, and you could say, well, but it's not them. It's they had someone to pray, but they had someone to pray representing them to the god
Waheguru.
Waheguru, right? And I know that before anyone says it, oh well, Waheguru is just the Hindu generic word for God, and I would say you stopped reading too soon. That's simply not the case. So there's no connection between Waheguru and the Judeo-Christian God. It's another God. So
I think they should have had like a Muslim pray, just so that it's like
at least that would be in the Abrahamic tradition, right?
no, it would no. It's still not even like if they had a Muslim pray, like they would have alienated the entire. So here's like you and I can talk about this, and see if what it is, even though we disagree on the existence of God. But like we can look at it and see they're doing they're making a publicity stunt, because the reason they wouldn't have a Muslim up there is because they know there's a huge chunk of the Republican voter base that looks at Muslims and thinks, oh, all Muslims are terrorists, or like they think of 9/11 immediately when they see a Muslim up there.
Yeah.
So they thought, and they're like, who do we go with that's not white, that's not Christian, that won't offend our voter base? And they were like, let's go with the sick guy.
It's such a short-sighted way of doing it, though, because once again, if you take Christianity seriously, and when I was a Christian, I certainly took it seriously. If you take Christianity seriously and you ask yourself, we want God to be in the midst of us and to bless what we're doing. And so if you just do a picturing exercise where you see God in the form of Jesus sitting in the front row, Do you invite a Sikh to pray to another God with Jehovah sitting in the front row? There is no freaking way you would do that. And so it just kind of shows a trivialization, in my opinion, between what they claim to believe and what they do, because what they do makes it seem like they don't really believe it at all, that it's all just a political calculation.
Right, right. That's what they're projecting to the rest of the world. That it's just to get votes, to win an election, to show that they're tolerant. Like, ironically enough, all the stuff about identity politics has made its way into the Republican Party, and they were saying like, oh, we shouldn't, like like they're just, I don't know, they're just the worst. But that doesn't mean the Democrats are better. It just means that the whole country as a whole, politically, everyone is in shambles. Like,
No,
you can't look at the big two parties and say, I like this
yeah, I
party
don't
because
look.
they're
I don't
better.
think that. I don't think the Democrats are better in that way either. But isn't religion just another identity for identity politics?
Well, it can, like, yes and no. Like, there's a way in which religion cannot be uh, just about show and tell for other people, and then there's other ways where the primary thing is to show off to other people, like, hey, look how religious I am, look how devoted I am, look how committed I am, look how much I love God, so much that I'll let someone who literally believes the opposite of what I believe come and pray because I'm so religious. And, like, there's a way in which religion, like, I would agree with lots of atheist arguments, like, there's a way in which religion is bad for the world, in the sense of, like, it makes it so that life is harder for people who perhaps are not as higher up socially, or higher up in terms of, like, being able to, like, see through things critically, like you're talking about the televangelist who's like, hey, send me money and then you'll get more money. And I'm like, that's bad religion right there. And that doesn't mean, though, that all of religion, like, in terms of what it means to be spiritually renewed, to be born again, that doesn't mean that's bad. It just means that there's ways in which it can find its expression where it ends up harming people and making their lives difficult. And we see this the most when Jesus confronts the Pharisees of his day, who were doing the exact same things that the Republicans are doing, like praying in street corners so that they may be seen.
At least the Pharisees were praying to the quote unquote right God. So
It,
I would have to
it
give it to
didn't
the
matter to
Pharisees
Jesus.
here.
It didn't
So,
even matter to Jesus that they were doing that. It's just that they were just doing it so that people can see
yeah.
how religious they were.
So look, more discussion on the boards on that one. I think there's a thread to be pulled at whether Christianity is just another identity in identity politics, and whether identity politics is actually a bad thing, because we all have identities. So and we identify as something.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
Well, the way the Republican Party uses Christianity, definitely they use it as an identity, like just something to be peddled. Like, they don't take it seriously the way it should be taken seriously.
right, and I think the same thing happens. Being very generous with that here, I think the same thing can happen with race. I think the same thing can happen with sexuality. I think the same thing can happen with all kinds of way. Our Americanism is can be an identity. I think the same thing can happen with anything that we use as an identity, and I think it's a real challenge to separate the people from their identity. We are identities. We identify ourselves in certain ways. Other people identify us in certain ways. And so, to some degree, you can never get away from what you would call identity politics. And I'm not sure that you should. But to the extent that it exists and can be used badly, it's not a one side thing. Everyone does. And I don't know where the balance is.
Yeah. But also there's a sense in which it's not simply just a one size fits all thing where it's like, hey, I am a Christian. So like I want to like maybe one day we'll talk about this in a specialized program. But like there's this idea of what's a true Christian and who's not a true Christian. And there's a sense in which especially for people who live not in the city but like in rural America where like there's a church on every single street corner pretty much. Like the challenge there for pastors usually is to get people to see that like just because you grew up in church and you do church things, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a Christian. That just because you are part of this identity, this or you vote a certain way or you act a certain way, that's not the litmus test. Like that's not what makes you a Christian. Like there's no big fundamental difference between that person who perhaps does church activities and is not saved versus the person who has never been to church. Like you can be both unsaved and be part of a church, and you can also be completely alienated from anything Christianity and be unsaved. So that's the biggest challenge, perhaps, for people in rural America to see. And in that sense, it can be an identity, but it's also not an identity.
Fine, let's take a swing at it next week. Um, I wanted to do that anyway, so great. This week, let's just cut through the noise and get down to it. So I've done 2 weeks of eviscerating the moral argument. So first, I played a video and a person kind of trying to make a novel spin on the moral argument. I thought that was fair enough, though, because the moral argument, we all know what the moral argument is and are familiar with its various forms. It's not a single thing. It's had revisions and so forth. And so this is just another revision that doesn't work. So the second week, I laid out 3,000 words of what I believe morality is, and I spoke mostly about definitions. So it cannot be said that I have not laid out my case. I have, and this is just the latest example of that. But what we haven't had is Mac, besides some comments on the board, make his case, and so I want to give Mac a chance to do that, but I also want to give a chance to eviscerate that too, because it's just bad. The moral argument, as an apologetic, is almost as bad as the ontological argument. I think the ontological argument is at the bottom. I think it's the worst. It's it's the worst. But heck, I would put Pascal above the ontological argument, honestly. But I think the moral argument is down there, and I don't think there's any kind of way to revise it in a way that makes it work. And so, Mac, you don't have to make a formalized version of, quote, the moral argument, but what I want to hear is your argument, your idea, your definitions of morality, and why it is you are so insistent that somehow you have to be a God believer to have a consistent and or sensible moral philosophy, if you will. So,
Well, yeah.
Take it away.
All right. Well, everyone has a moral system, right? Like I think everyone would agree with that. The moral argument pretty much says that there can be no objective morality without the existence of God. And what that means is that there can be no oughts, like one person. So like think of the Holocaust. Like if Hitler won and everyone else who survived, you and me, like down to this age, we thought that, hey, what Hitler did was right. Like 100% of people on the planet thought that what Hitler did was right. Like what moral objectivity says is that it would still be wrong. Like, even if all of us agreed that what Hitler did was right, it would still be wrong. That's pretty much what the argument states. And it's saying that that's not possible. Like, we can't do that. Like, we can't rely on our own intuition to make judgments on morals without looking to someone who is outside of our own human system.
Okay,
So in
can
this,
I ask a
yeah,
question of clarification there
sure,
before you get, because this is a common, I think canard maybe, but it's a common thing. So Hitler, his extermination of Jews, everybody, and let's say including the Jews, thought that what Hitler did was right. Well, just running that thought experiment, then no one would be challenging its morality. There would
but
there would
yeah,
be zero people in this hypothetical, including the people in the gas chambers, saying that there was anything wrong with it at all. And so, let's say that there is something cosmically wrong with it. How would you ever know that, since no one thinks it's wrong?
exactly, and that's the point, that in an atheistic system, no one could ever know like something is wrong, like because it's based on what human beings decide. Now, it could happen that 500 years in the future, human beings look at that and they're like, well, actually that was pretty evil. But then the people who lived during the time they would have no way of knowing, because ultimately they're looking to themselves. They're saying, hey, all of us agree that it was pretty good what he did, right? And they'd be like, yep. And then no one would even question it.
Okay, but
But
Christians are also part of the human factor there. So
right,
how would you
yeah,
know it was wrong? You're saying in an atheist system, but
yeah, in
in
an
your
atheist system,
system, how would you know it was wrong? If your hypothetical is everybody thinks it's okay.
like because of God's objective revelation, uh, via the Bible, where he says like everyone's made in the image of God. Do not oppress the weak and the poor. That's what
So
Hitler did, right?
why were there Christians who supported it?
No, I'm giving it as a model of like uh what would happen if everyone was like an atheist materialist, right? Like if
But
everyone,
in the real Holocaust, Christians supported Hitler. Some.
well, there were some and there were others who opposed him. And the thing is this, like we can have, like we just talked about this with the Republicans. Like you can say that they're, like you literally talked about an article where a Christian says what the sick prayer did was good. So like what the argument is getting at is that it's not like the ball doesn't stop with another human being. Like in terms of determining what's actually moral, what someone ought to do, it doesn't stop with a human opinion. Like we can't say, okay, human beings are the final arbiters of what's truly moral, because we are all flawed. We all have bad reasoning. We all make mistakes. We all think, like we're all bound to our cultures in one way or another, right? So like imagine an Anglo-Saxon warrior 1,000 years ago, and he's just walking around and he's just thinking of, like, he walks by a village and he's like, that's a good village to pillage. And he goes and he gets his friends and he pillages the village, and now everything that those people own is his. Now, if we take that person and we put them in the 21st century, like we would tell him like, you're having these thoughts, but you shouldn't be having these thoughts. You should go see a therapist. But you see, the thing is, in his culture, that was totally fine. That was totally normal. And without a way of him knowing that there's something outside of him that condemns that kind of behavior, he's always going to be constrained to his time, his culture, his feelings, uh, and like just what he wants to do. And I feel like in atheism, it constrains every single person to their feelings, their thoughts, their culture, in terms of determining what's moral. So what's moral is what all those things tell me is moral.
Okay, so I don't actually see any difference between that and any system that a Christian would devise. You mentioned, some barbaric times in the Dark Ages and then the 21st century, but, we can just drop back to the 18th century and look at all those Christian conquistadors conquering the new land that we now call home and Christian. So, it's not like Christians are a better example than
Well,
any
I'm not arguing
barbarian
that they are.
non-Christians.
No, I'm
Okay,
not saying that Christians are better. Like I just spent like the first 20 minutes saying Christians are not better.
but what I'm
They're
trying
not
to get at,
better
I'm
than
yeah, but
anyone else.
I'm not trying to dig at that. What I'm trying to get at is in your formulation of morality, you're saying yes, but there's this higher thing, and I guess maybe what I'm suggesting is if that higher thing exists and yet it does not do anything to inform people in the moment that what they are doing is wrong, then I'm not sure how we can tell it exists at all.
Well, then that's where Christianity comes in because it says that God does inform people on what is right and wrong via His revealed word, via their consciences, via the Holy Spirit, all these things. And it's not simply that humans are left to themselves to just come up with what's right and what's wrong. And that doesn't also mean that there can't be atheists who are better people, like morally speaking, uh, than a Christian. So like that's why when I see you posting like, "Oh, Christian did this wrong thing," I'm like, "Well, yeah, like still humans at the end of the day." But that the essence of Christianity isn't that it makes you it's not that it makes you someone who's like perfect, like you're perfect, like you're like utterly morally like better than everyone else
I,
automatically. The second you say, I believe in Jesus, that you're now better than all the people on the
I
planet.
understand that, and I'm not trying to suggest that. What I'm trying to say, though, is that if you have a superior moral system that at the end of the day doesn't play out any better than a secular moral system, then your moral system, no matter how superior, is indistinguishable from one that is secular. And so, if it is indistinguishable, I don't know why we should appeal to it at all.
I would disagree because Christianity has the best track record on the planet for what you would call human flourishing and freedom. And it can be shown and demonstrated that it does have the power to change a culture that perhaps is completely pagan from doing certain abominable actions, which, by the way, you'd have to account for if there is no such thing as good or evil, to a culture where people are now helping the poor or being tolerant to their neighbors. Like I would say Christianity is responsible for Western civilization as we know it today. And so, in that sense, it's superior to other worldviews like um, secularism or humanism, which are very localized to just individuals and how individuals should live their lives. And like the challenge is perhaps for you to show here's why secularism is better than Christianity, because when secularism went to this place that was like this, then those people stopped doing that. Like, would you happen to have like an example of a situation like that?
I don't know. I'd have to give it some thought.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure that Christianity has any examples like that, and I know the kinds of things that you would mention, but I don't know that I would put those things at the feet of Christianity. Simply because there were Christians involved with doing it. Because for everything that you would say, oh, Christians stood up against this thing and ended this social ill, they had to fight against other Christians who were fighting to do that social ill. And so I don't know that you can then say, well, the Christian worldview is superior.
right, but then that becomes a question of like epistemology and like what does like who is seeing, who is interpreting the Bible correctly. And when it comes to that, like I know people say like, oh well, anyone can have any interpretation that they want, but like uh in Christian theism, like there's such a thing as true interpretation of scripture and false interpretation of scripture. So an example of that would be when um the devil is tempting Jesus in the wilderness and quotes scripture, and then Jesus quotes scripture back and says, yes, that's true, but also this is also true. So in a sense, there's a sense in which some Christians are like, look, it says this, and then others are like, no, no, yeah, it says that, but it also says this. And that's what hermeneutics is all about. Um, so in that, but big picture wise, in terms of Western civilization itself, the ending of slavery in the West, that falls squarely on the Christian worldview coming in and just intervening in a big way.
Yeah, I seriously doubt that.
Well, well,
I
it's true, but
I
you
mean
can
I
disagree. But I just know it's true. Like you could read
like I said,
whole
I know that
volumes.
Christians were involved in ending slavery. I wouldn't try to remove the part of people who identified as Christians in that, but there are also people who identified as atheists who were there too. But you would like to remove them,
No,
and
no,
by
I wouldn't remove them if you could tell me their names.
furthermore, I would also say that the biggest proponents of maintaining slavery and Jim Crow segregation, apartheid type politics were Christians.
And I would
And
say they
and
were
I
wrong
well, sure, you can say they were wrong,
based on
but
scripture. Yeah,
but
but they
I'm
weren't
saying,
arguing. Yeah, yeah.
well, hang on, but they were
Sure.
Christians, and so what you're asking me to do then is determine which of the Christians were acting as true Christians and which were acting as false Christians, and this is kind of where I think your argument falls down, that the good stuff comes from Christians. You're just claiming any good thing that happened and saying that's true Christianity, and the bad stuff is that was bad Christianity.
Yeah.
And I don't buy that.
I'm just saying, like, if someone is going to critique Christianity and be like, "What about the Crusades? What about the Inquisition?" They owe it to themselves to look at the scriptures and see what it was that Christ said about what it like. If you see someone spreading the gospel by forcing, like, putting a sword to someone's neck, and you're like, oh wow, that's true Christianity. Let's say you experience that's what let's say you and I are Native Americans, and some Spanish people wearing crosses come, and that's how they spread Christianity. Then I would be, like, in a sense, justified to think, wow, that's what Christ taught these people to do. But there's then the objective truth that when you look at what the scriptures say, you never find Jesus saying, if you run into some unbelievers, then you gotta threaten to kill them,
Okay, well,
right?
if Jesus is God, he is in fact the one who commanded the destruction of the Canaanites. So
That's a separate issue, though. But like,
I don't think that is a separate issue, but I mean
well, it
that's
is a separate
consistent.
issue,
That's consistent with the behavior that you are decrying now.
right? But the Canaanites weren't killed because they were mainly not. They were not mainly part of the Jew. They were killed because they were morally, in a sense, they had their iniquity had filled up. But that's a
Right,
whole other thing.
like you think is so true of so many people in the world, but you don't say, "Oh, we need to kill them."
Well, no, no. Well, you're just attributing what you think I think. Like, I can tell you what I think if you ask me. Um, I don't think that you could just go around and start killing people in India because they're not Christians. Like, that's not what I think. Basically, like, someone can read the Bible and think like, "Wow, that's what you're supposed to do," but that's not how I understand the Bible. How I believe Christians throughout the centuries until very recently have understood the Bible. And so it's not like a one size fits all. Like, it's not like I can open up a random page in the Bible and see, okay, you're not supposed to eat
Great. Let
shellfish
me
and be
let me
like,
let me let me
wow, that
ask
applies
you
to all
let
Christians.
me ask you a specific question, then, so that you can answer it in your own
Sure.
words instead of me interpolating. If there is a society today that is, in your opinion, as wicked as the Canaanites were, then would it be a good thing to kill them all?
Today, no,
Okay,
because
then
again, there's no, the mandate isn't to go and murder
okay, but then
uh,
but my point stands then.
unbelievers. No, because I think I get what you're trying to say. You're trying to equate something that happened very specifically with a specific set of people who had the presence of God within their midst visibly versus us today in the 21st century, where obviously the covenant has changed. There's a new covenant now, and you're saying, well, it's
I'm
the same
asking if
thing.
the situation was the same with the same
Well,
action.
it can never be the same because it's not.
Okay, but
It's not the
then you're not
same.
engaging with the question because
Yeah, because the question isn't realistic.
what the question point it's a hypothetical question, but what the question points to is the fact that the God that you are hailing now, you're saying that we would see the kinds of things that this God would do and the kinds of things this God wouldn't do. It would never do an inquisition. And we can look back at the times when he did do that and worse. I don't think that your argument can hold then that this God wouldn't do that and that is outside of his character and his commands or what have you. I'm not misinterpreting this God. The only thing that you can say is, well, he hasn't commanded it today. But you can't say he's not that kind of guy. He is that kind of guy.
Yeah, and my response again is to say that you're conflating two separate issues. You're taking commands that were given to specific people in specific times. It's like if I'm driving on the road and there's like an ambulance behind me and it's doing 90 and I have to move out of the way, right? And so that doesn't also give me the right to start doing 90 miles per hour because of the ambulance is doing it. So in the same way, it's like I can't look at past actions and imply that just because something was allowed or permitted in the past, then that means it can carry over to the future because
But it
there's a
does,
very
but it,
specific reason for why God commanded the Canaanites. Like in Genesis, it tells you why. It's because they were full of iniquity. They were like God actually gave them 400 years so that he comes and judges them. And then in the history of the Israelites, the same thing ends up happening to them. So it wasn't like God was playing favorites with the Israelites. The Israelites are better than the Canaanites because the
I'm
Israelites
not, I'm not
themselves
saying that it worked out
got
well for the
judged
Jews
the
either.
same way.
No, it
Right.
didn't work. It
And
didn't
you're
work out
saying
well
like,
for the Jews.
okay, and the way it's always presented is that, like God has his favorites over there. Like he likes Jews, hates non-Jews. And so like God could say, okay, white people kill black people or something like that. Like God could say that today. But
He,
he wouldn't say that
I
today.
don't think you could say he wouldn't, but because he seems like the kind of guy, based on his track record, that he would. But I mean, you brought up slavery. I was going to actually very carefully dance around bringing it up, but I would just say that the people, the Christians back in the day, who were supporting slavery that other Christians were fighting against, they were claiming biblical authority
Yeah.
and the kind of person that God is, and the kind of commands that God has given, and the kinds of commands that He never rescinded. And so I think they would have been well within their rights under some kind of religious point of view to say, look, if we conduct slavery the way God commanded slavery to be conducted, we're right and you're wrong.
Yeah, they were arguing like atheists. Because like the argument that you're making right now is pretty much what they used. And I'm not denying it because I've read some of these pamphlets. Like I was studying a pamphlet from a Presbyterian, like he was writing like an entire treatise about why it's biblical to still um, own, own slaves. And he was arguing the exact same way, where it's like you just open the Bible to Leviticus to Deuteronomy, and you don't take all of it into account. You only just take specific sections, and you say, okay, I'm
Okay,
going
but
to focus on this section
they
without
also
seeing.
cited the New Testament too, which was also slavery friendly. So it's not
Yeah,
just
well,
some rogue passages in Leviticus.
I know of the passages that they're citing, but you also know that Paul says that slave trading is a sin. in the New Testament.
There were ways to do slavery wrong, but there
No,
were
no,
ways
he
to do it.
says
Oh, hang on.
trading slaves.
There were ways to do slavery wrong. That was true in the Old Testament system too, but there were ways to do slavery right. And so, what the slavers said is, if you do it the right way according to the Bible, then you can't. There's nothing wrong with it.
Well, that's not, and I'm going to post the exact, because like it helps to get into the actual arguments that people were making. People were making arguments like
Right?
pretty much that
There's
said,
tons of documentation on that.
right, right.
I can post.
I'm not denying it, but I'm just saying that the way they were arguing is kind of the same way you're saying it, where it's like you open the Bible or a random place and you say, okay, I'm going to take these verses and I'm going to copy and paste them and say, look, slavery is endorsed, so we should keep doing it. But that's not how the biblical narrative, if you're studying it the way that the early church, the apostles, Christ himself understood it. It wasn't, let's take the Bible and just take like how the devil took a psalm and said, okay, you believe in God, right? Then, and this verse says that angels will catch you, so you should throw yourself from the top of the roof and God will send his angels, because it says so right there, right? And Jesus says, no, it also says you shall not test God. And in a sense, there's a sense in which someone can be a Christian and they can take a verse and they can say it says this, but then they can ignore like other verses that, if seen together with that verse, it would make that verse fold into the bigger picture. That's all I'm saying. But like
Okay.
all of that to get to this, like I wanted to ask you this question.
Mhm.
Like, what is morality to you? What do you understand morality to mean?
I literally wrote 3,500 words on it. So, um, let's see. Which part of that would you like me to condense?
Just just
'Cause
give me
I
a
think I could have written
sentence.
a full book on it.
Just give me one sentence or two sentences of what is it, where does that come from? Because I want to understand it. I don't want to misrepresent you. I want to understand it from your perspective, your worldview, because like you notice my profile picture is Nietzsche, and the way I understand him is how like I imagine uh, atheists think about morality. But obviously, that's not the case, because people are like, no, Nietzsche was dumb. And I don't think he was dumb. I think he was very consistent with what he believed. So, uh, to him, and I'm gonna stop talking in a few seconds. To him, morality was, there was no such thing as a moral fact. It was only moral interpretations. Like you can only interpret something. Like, so killing people, or murdering someone, killing the president, that you can only, like, there's no such thing as something is actually bad. Like, it's evil. You can't say something is evil. It's only a question of perspective. So what is morality according to you?
Okay. So, first of all, to anyone listening to this, just look up at the top of the page and read 3,500 words. Second, to try to condense it. Here, from my perspective, the only thing that I am concerned about when I talk about morality is social benefit versus social harm. I'm not even talking about social neutrality, because if anything that is neutral and does not do benefit or harm to others is what I would put in the camp of amoral, and I don't give a damn about. So I am only talking about the things that benefit or harm people outside of yourself. And to the extent that you do behaviors that create benefit or harm to others, that's the extent where that's the realm of behavior that I am talking about when I'm talking about morality.
Okay. So morality is causing harm to other people.
It is the description of social interactions that cause benefit or harm. It is it is a set of descriptions and maybe philosophies on how to cause benefit and avoid harm.
Okay. Um.
It's not some metaphysical thing. There's no
o-
metaphysical content in it. It's not a
Okay.
spiritual thing. There's no spiritual content in it.
Do you have like an example of something that perhaps could have been moral in the past, but is not moral today? Like you could say, like, yeah, it made sense for those people to do that back in the day, but we can't do like, is there something you can point to?
Let me give it some thought. So I don't think I would put it that way, because I think those are two different things. I could say that it made sense for someone to do certain things at a certain time that don't make sense today, but it doesn't mean that I think it's moral for them at that time. It just made
So,
sense. So
it,
those are separate questions. I'll give you an example of that. So I think that there was a time when it made sense to lock people up or exile people or even kill people from your society that you could not contain. You couldn't control them. You didn't understand mental illness. You couldn't medicate them. You didn't have the facilities or the resources to, lock someone up for life. And that person is so criminally and mentally deranged that they are going to continually kill and torture innocent people if you don't do something drastic. I can see where it makes sense to that society of people to take some drastic action that maybe we wouldn't need to take today. And I can also see the actions that we take today making sense to us today, but would not make sense for people 1,000 years from now who have way better alternatives. Now, the question of whether the things we do are moral always hinges on, once again for me, social benefit, social harm. And there may be a degree to which doing a bad thing to a single person benefits society because it stops someone who is bent on killing everybody from killing any more people. So
but you
you did harm that person. Even if you lock them up in jail for life, you've harmed that person, but you have benefited hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of people in the process, and I
okay.
would consider
Um,
that social benefit.
so taking what you said right there and then juxtaposing it to the Canaanite situation, why do you have a problem with you said because you've said that it's like it made sense at the time for a certain group of people to do something because you have all these or you have a wild person running around and there's no way to I don't know rehabilitate them um, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around like you're saying that their actions were not like were they moral, were they immoral, were they amoral? Like, would you categorize them in any of those three boxes?
Uh,
Or would you just say,
yeah.
oh, it made sense for them to do that?
Well, would you say they? Who am I categorizing? The
Well, the people who do things, right, who did things rather, that you would say, well, can't do them today because we're more advanced or whatever.
Okay, so
Right,
you're talking about society and their solutions, and not the crazy person running around
right.
killing everybody. Okay,
Well,
uh,
both if you can.
okay. Well, the person running around killing everybody is acting immorally in my system because he's actively harming literally everybody. So
All right.
that's a very simple classification. The society that contains this person, to the extent that they are trying to benefit society, their intentions are moral. To the extent that they actually benefit society, their actions are moral. But if, in fact, their attempt to contain this person harms society, then it would be immoral. So, for instance, one way, just a wild example, one way to kill this one guy or to contain this one guy who's causing all this harm is to blow up a nuke in the city and kill everybody. All right, you've taken care of the problem. That guy's not going around hurting anybody, but you've killed everybody to do it. So
So yeah, so was that moral? Is that a moral thing that the United States did?
Well, okay. I don't. You're changing context.
No.
In my example, it's very very easy to see that that would be immoral, even with moral intent. If you're trying to kill one guy or stop one guy, and you do that by killing everybody, the question of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, is a different question. It could have the same answer, but I'm not going to get sidetracked to answer it right now. So I want to stay
Right.
with the question, the
Because
examples given.
right, because morality isn't so black and white. It's not. It's not
Well,
very
what I said, it was pretty
easy
black
to
and white.
understand.
No, okay, but you are
Right.
supposedly trying to understand. You wanted me to
Yeah,
to break down
I am.
3,500
I think
words,
I'm
and
getting
so
it. No, I
okay.
think I'm getting it now, and I just see like it just leaves so many holes. Like there's so many
Okay, so
holes.
what's the whole?
Or,
And try to stick with the
like
example I gave.
okay, the example you gave, like you can't look back at a society and say those people were acting immorally because by their understanding, by their standards, they were doing what makes sense to them. Like
Okay,
you can't
then you
say
didn't hang on.
they were
You didn't hear the first part I said then, because what I said before going into that was I think you're talking about two different things. What is what makes sense and what is actually moral. Okay, it makes sense to think that someone might be possessed by demons, depending on where you come from and what you've been taught and what your society is inundated with. That might make sense. But then if you do something, as if to kill a demon, that ends up killing this person that you think is demon possessed, you are acting immorally. You are acting in a way that makes sense, but it is also immoral. So simply because something makes sense for you to do, it for someone who's mentally ill, what they are doing makes sense. It doesn't make it moral. It doesn't make it socially beneficial. So no, I definitely did not say what you said I said. Looking back, I can definitely see where a lot of things that primitive cultures did made sense to them. That does not mean that I think it was moral.
right. And the same could also apply to you in the future when people look back at the things that you say are moral and say, okay, it made sense for David to be for those things, but he was clearly very immoral. Like
Yes,
that can also apply to you.
and you can judge that easily by seeing whether what I said and did created social harm or social benefit,
But
because that is
you
a
have
very
a blind
simple
spot,
definition that I'm using.
right? Right. It's simple, but like you have a huge blind spot, like this the same way your ancestors did, because they were doing things that made sense to them, and you're also doing things that make sense to you, but you have a blind spot that perhaps you're not like able to admit that you have and say, well, yeah, there are things that I'm doing right now which are immoral, but I don't know if they're immoral or not, but I think they're moral. That future generations will be able to look back and say the exact same thing about you and say,
Yes, but
yes,
they would
right.
also, if they're listening to this podcast, will know that I did not conflate what makes sense with what is moral. So even now, I can say of my some of the things that I do support, that it makes sense for me to support it, even though it may not be the most moral thing.
It may
I
be
will.
immoral.
It may be immoral. I can give you an example of that right now, if you'd like one. and you can paste me with real examples as opposed to made up ones. I think that someone should shoot Putin.
Well,
I think Putin should be dead. I think the fact that so many people, nations in the world that have the power to off Putin don't do it. I think that's immoral. I think that Putin is bad for the world. I think they should have done it in North Korea. I think that there are people that are so bad for the world. That doesn't mean you go in and bomb Russia or North Korea, but we have ways today of eliminating people like that, and to not use it, I think is a moral ill. I think that we are doing greater harm in the world than good. Now, I might be wrong about that. And you could say, yeah, but if you kill Putin, you've harmed Putin, and so that is an immoral act. Okay, I'm not even going to argue that. Great. It's an immoral act, but it makes sense to me that that one immoral act creates so much more moral value. Putin should be dead. He should not
right.
be in power.
The,
So
but
that's I'm
the
pretty
problem
straight
that
on that.
the problem with your system though is that if it's based on what makes sense to people, then you know that there are all kinds of people who are not on the same level of intelligence, same level of like they're not
Morality
able
is
to
not based on what
temper.
makes sense to people. Stop saying that. These are
Well,
separate
well, then
domains.
the people
What makes
people act,
sense is understandable, not necessarily moral. I
but
Please stop
people
conflating it.
act. If is morality based on how people act, like what people do, what people say, right? What people think. Maybe I don't know. Maybe don't say think. Um, if someone acts, then they're acting in a way that makes sense to them, right? And if you're saying everyone just does what makes sense to them, and that culture over there that does stuff that makes sense to them, like you can say, oh, they're acting immorally because they don't have enough information, but then about yourself, like you can't say that because it's like you're saying like I only do stuff that makes sense to me because I'm a rational person. I only act based on evidence, da da da. But you're not seeing that the same scales that you're using to judge another society could be used for you,
I'm going to
and you're
say it
kind of just
again.
making
I'm going to say it again. I do not conflate what makes sense with morality. By the way, anyone who reads some of those 3,500 words will notice that I also include intent as a part of the definition that I use. So I'm truncating it a lot for the purpose of the conversation. But I also think that, well, when we're talking about something like evil versus good, intent is important. If we're just talking about what benefits or doesn't benefit, intent may not be important. I thought I was benefiting my community by building a bridge over that river so that people could cross. However, I'm not a bridge builder. I'm not an engineer. I hate math, and I built the bridge out of cardboard, and 100 people died trying to cross the bridge. Okay, well, what you did was morally bad. Even if you intended something good from it, I would say that you're probably mentally ill. But what you ended up doing was socially detrimental. All right? I understand why you did it. This is not about that, though. So I understand it. But if you want me to make a judgment on whether it was a morally good thing based on my definition or a morally bad thing, that is a separate question than
right.
whether what you did was
So
understandable.
you have to separate actions from intentions from all these other things because you would agree that it's all very complicated, right?
No, I haven't said anything that's
Oh,
very
it's
complicated.
not. No, I'm saying like morality itself is complicated. It's not just a matter of those people are right and we're right, they're wrong. Da 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 da. There's complex things involved. So like that culture where they eat people, they're doing that because it makes sense to them.
No,
But
okay. Here again,
you can't say
you're
no no.
trying to. That's not has nothing to do with morality. That has
Okay,
nothing
so
to do
it
with
has
morality.
nothing to do. That's what I'm trying to get at. Does that have anything to do with
I keep
morality?
saying that what makes sense or doesn't make sense, what I can understand of people's behavior has nothing to do with my judgment of whether it's moral. I
Okay, so what is
understand why many people do some of the bad things they do. I can
okay?
get it. I understand it, but it's still socially detrimental and
So
therefore immoral by my definition. We're only talking about my definition. You got to keep
okay,
up.
no, no, I understand it because, like I said, secularism is tailor made for an individual. So I can talk to someone else who's a secularist this afternoon, and they would probably say, like, we shouldn't kill Putin because that's not how we should solve political problems in our day. Like they would say, what you're
Possibly,
advocating, yeah, right. And
right,
so it's like, who's
what they
morally
would
right
what
between you?
I'm sorry, but what they would suggest is that we should do that which is beneficial to society. Now, we might disagree on implementation, but we're not disagreeing on the beneficial to society part. That's not what we're
But
disagreeing on.
for a person who's a supremacist, then what you think is beneficial for society is detrimental to society, according to them. So, like, who gets to decide who among you is right? Is it just the majority votes, or like how do you guys figure that out amongst yourselves? Like, what's like, do you have like, is there a standard? There's no
I,
standard.
I think that you are hung up on this concept of absolutes,
So absolutes
and
don't exist.
and you were asking me to give you example after example after example of uh, morality, and I'm giving you that, but it's not satisfactory to you because I'm playing checkers and you're playing parcheesi. You have a different game, a different goal in mind, and it's trying to sneak in some other concepts that I am not giving. And I've given a very thoroughgoing explanation
I don't think
of
so.
morality. Well, then you maybe should go back and read some of those 3,500
I did
words.
read it. That's
Okay,
why I'm
I've
still
given
not
I've
clear.
given a very thoroughgoing explanation of it, and so maybe what you should do is give your explanation of morality that includes these other concepts that you're trying to shoehorn into mine.
I'm not trying to shoehorn anything. I'm just trying to understand what you mean when you say that something is evil. Like, okay, I
I
think
haven't
I
said
understand.
anything
Right.
understand that's not
But
understandable. So
well, I'm sure it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense on a scale outside of you. So what I mean is this: like, you're saying there's a difference between seeing the reason behind something versus calling something moral or immoral, whereas I don't see that distinction, and I don't think you've provided a basis for where that's how things need to be seen, like you do. Like,
okay,
I
maybe I can get you to use an example. You seem to want to you seem to like the Canaanites as an
no,
example pretty
well,
well. So,
you brought up the Canaanites.
well, I did, but
Right.
when I brought up other examples, you wanted to kind of go back to the Canaanites as a kind of a way, a canard, a way of saying, oh, so how can you say that God did wrong by ordering the slaughter of the Canaanites? So if that fits with your idea of morality, why don't you use that as an example or something like that as an example, and show me how your morality works? Because I think that your idea of morality has a few more components to it than mine does. I've been very clear on mine.
Right, because in a sense, what I was trying to get at was that if we look back, like, just if we took what you just said, then we can never ever judge previous cultures and say, like, if it's all based on what human beings do based on what they think is right for society, if that's the biggest standard, like
Okay,
there's just one commandment.
let me ask you again. Don't worry about. Don't try to summarize my view because it's clear
I'm
that you
not.
can't do
I
that. I
am.
want
I
to
am
hear
not.
what your view is.
No, I'm building up. I'm
Okay.
building up to the idea that when someone says the slaughter of the Canaanites was immoral, and then I ask them, okay, what is immoral? And they say, well, something that harms society. I'm like, okay, and then we talk about, okay, what about something like capital punishment? Is that immoral? And then they say, like you just said it a few minutes ago, you were saying like a society, it made sense for society to, if they have no way of uh, helping or rescuing a person who's wild and everything, then it makes sense to end their life. And you just said, okay, same thing with Putin, who's oppressing a bunch of people. Uh, it's moral to kill him.
No, I
Um,
didn't. I said it makes sense to kill him. I said even my own impulse to do that, to believe that, might be immoral.
okay,
But
so
but you
you're
should
not.
be able to understand why I would want a Putin dead.
I would like.
Because we were
I.
giving
I
live
but
examples. But once
but
again,
I'm not.
you're
No, no.
missing the brief. You're not giving me
I'm
your.
I'm trying to get to it, and I'm also like I'm like putting some padding to just springboard off what you're saying, because what
Don't
you're
worry about
saying.
what I'm saying. Speak
No,
to an audience that
I
doesn't
have
know
to
who.
worry
No,
about what you're saying, because I inevitably in the comments there will be that famous trio were saying that, oh, you're just making things up, like, or you just like to do
oh,
this, da 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 da. Da.
okay.
But
I
I'm
gave my
trying.
view of morality without regard to what your view was. This is
Right,
my
and
view. I'm
right.
asking you to do the same.
Okay,
Give
I'm
your
gonna do it.
view of
I
morality.
I'm getting to it. I'm getting to it right now.
Okay.
Okay. All right. This is part of it. This is part of my view. My part of my view is also, it takes into account every other view. Okay. So my view of morality can't be that it's localized to me, or localized to my culture, or localized to my reason, as flawed as it often is, or localized to just simply the whims of what other people say. It has to transcend, and that's what we're getting to. It has to transcend who I am, what I think, how I feel, what other people think, what other people say, what other people feel. It has to go beyond that, right? So that in a sense, I can say without a shadow of a doubt to anyone living at any point in history that what they did, even though it made sense to them to do, it made sense for them to do it, I can say to them, what you did was immoral. What you did was evil. What you did was not good. Even if you thought you were doing best, the best thing for your society, you were like, I'm doing this because I love my culture. I love my people. I love myself. I'm doing this because I love all these things. I can still say to them, you are evil. That's where my view of morality, like, that's what it is. That's where it starts, and that's where it ends. And also, like, I could elaborate more on it, but because like thousands of books have been written about it. But what I don't see in the alternative position that is presented in modern times, because when I tried to first understand secular, I like understandings of what morality is, I went to Nietzsche, and he pretty much says that morality, like, is just what people decide. Now that we are past the age of believing in God, we as a society, as human beings, have to go beyond just simply the Christian ethics of this is good and this is evil. We have to go beyond that, and formulate this ideal man who uh, who just comes up with a new set of morals. That's pretty much what he says, and I respect that argument, because at least it's consistent. It sees the issues that I have. It sees the hangups that I have about being able to look at Anglo-Saxons whose culture is based on pillaging villages and saying what you're doing is evil. Whereas I don't think someone who has bought into your view would be able to say that and remain consistent.
Why not? What part of
Be-
what part of what you just said is not what I spent a bunch of time saying? So
because
what are
the
you, where's the
definition
disconnect?
you've given of morality, and you can correct me, like I'm not being dogmatic about it. This is your belief, right? Like I don't want to misrepresent your
No,
belief, but
actually, it's your
how I
belief
heard,
because I was asking you to give yours, and I don't
well,
see what you
I just
said that's
did.
different from what I said.
Well, what you said was that there's a difference between what makes sense versus what is moral, right?
Right, which you also confirmed. So what else? Where's the difference?
No, I don't see it that way. I see that they're the same, like they're the
No,
same thing.
you said that you could
Well, I'm saying it
understand
now,
why someone did a thing, but you would still be able to say that it's evil. Me too.
but and that's what doesn't make sense to me, because you're saying that there's no transcendental, objective, absolute
Do you
law.
remember how I defined evil?
What causes harm to society, right?
No, that's how I defined immorality. Do you remember specifically
Well,
how I defined evil?
you didn't talk about evil, if
I
I remember
did.
correctly.
I actually did, and you can go back and read it, but I will give you a
Well,
hint because I already did. It's malevolent intent.
what is malevolence? Like, what is that?
I'm not going to answer that. You know what
Okay.
malevolence is, right? So, I would say that if you don't know what malevolence is, internet's your friend. Go for it. It's malevolent intent. Now, having spent probably the first 1,000 words of the 3,500 words on definitions, and having a really good solid background of having defined all of these things, I can say 100% to everything that you just said in your explanation. I absolutely agree with that, and it does not disagree with anything that I said. The disagreement will come, as it inevitably does, when the Christian, in this case you, defines what they mean by these terms. I defined what I meant by these terms, and I argue that they're different than what you mean by these terms. And so, what I will ask you to do next is define what you mean. You asked me this, it's only fair. Define morality, and also define good and evil. Let me throw those in, since those words have crept into the conversation and are things that I have also already defined. So let's see where the disconnect is, because I believe it is in the definitions, the meanings that we pour into these common words that we're using very differently.
So you want me to do a 3,500 word essay?
No, I want you to
By
define your terms. I want you to define morality as I did, and I want you to define good and evil. 3 words.
all right, good is that which emanates or comes from God. Goodness is rooted in the character of God. Evil is the absence of good, which means the absence of that which comes from God. And morality is acting in line with what is in line with the character of God, acting in line with what is in line with
And
the character of
there we
God.
have it.
That's what is good.
There we have
Right.
it. And
So
we could
you were
actually stop.
asking
We could
it
stop
as a
there.
gotcha question, right? It wasn't
No,
a
it
sincere
wasn't a
question.
gotcha question. It is
No, because you're like, there we
we
go.
could, but there it is. This is what I have been
Right.
saying for years. When I define morality and good and evil, I need no reference to a God. When you define it, a God is definitely a
Yes.
necessity, a prerequisite to define those terms. When the Christian is
But
talking about the good, when
you
the
don't have to
Christian is
be
talking
the
about
Christian
the
when I'm right here. I'm
well, look,
literally right here.
I mean the Christian. I don't just mean you. You're not the only Christian. When the
Well, I
Christian
didn't.
is talking
Oh my
about the
gosh.
good, they are talking about the God. And this is why, even though we can say many words that do not disagree and we're using the same words, it always
Wait,
comes down to what you
you didn't
mean
even
by these
let me finish.
words.
You didn't let me finish
Well,
because
I'm going to
at
let you
the end of the
finish.
day,
I'm going to let you finish. I'm going to give it back. I understand that that was a truncated definition. I'm going to give you a chance to spool it out. I just want to point out what I have been saying for years and years and years, and what I have said in my most recent paper. It all comes down to the definition, and this is why. This is where the debate really is. It's on the definition of these words and how the Christian cannot support any concept of morality or good or evil that does not start with God. And this is why the Christian and the atheist cannot actually have a beneficial, profitable, productive, honest conversation about this until there is some kind of bridge language between those words. And there is no bridge. We are diametrically opposed with what these things mean. And I don't see any way of coming together
right?
on that.
Like I I wasn't disagreeing with you. I was just, you asked me a question and I gave you an answer, and then you went into this tirade about, you see, but like, here's the main point. When it comes to whether people can have like in my worldview, it makes sense for you to think that morality is simply what makes uh, uh, morality is localized to how society flourishes. Like that makes sense to me, because that's not all encompassing, because that is only localized to you, your culture, your society, your experience. And what I'm saying, or rather what we're saying, or rather what God says, is that morality isn't simply something that is localized to just you and how you feel or how you see things or how you act or how you understand things. It goes beyond you. Whereas you're in a culture where everything is kind of filtered through this individual uh, nexus of, okay, I'm going to see if this makes sense to me. It's very pragmatic. If something doesn't make sense to you, then it becomes, in a sense, immoral, or like, I don't understand why they're doing this in a certain way as opposed to doing it this way, therefore it's immoral. And I'm not saying that this is how everything gets filtered, but this is how lots of things get filtered. And so, in the same way, when I ask you, okay, would you be able to say that those people in that society did something immoral, and you say, yeah, I can say that they're immoral, but you're using it as, you're like, you're kind of like hedging your bet in a way. You're saying, like, I can understand why it made sense. Well, that's irrelevant whether it made sense or not. Like, that's not even part of the conversation. That's kind of like you putting scaffolding to make sure that it doesn't sound bad. Was it immoral for them to do? Well, yes, but for them it wasn't. But you don't have a standard to judge them by. You're only just like it just becomes a question of, like, the word loses all its meaning, because if someone is doing something because they believe they're trying to benefit society, then how can that be immoral for them? They're acting morally, but you're saying you can call them immoral, but you can't do that, and that's the biggest disconnect in what
Yes,
you
I
believe.
can. This is one of the reasons why I don't tend to use the word moral in normal communication. I don't talk about morality unless we're talking about some philosophical position on a discussion board. The only question that I would ask mostly is, was their actions beneficial to society or not?
Well, that's a
And now,
subjective question.
well, I think it's actually less subjective than you are suggesting, but that is the question that I would ask. I would not ask, in my normal way of being, is that moral or not? That's something for you to care about. If you want to care about it, does it benefit or harm? That's what I care about. And so I would ask it in that way. And I think that we can ask that of many cultures. We could ask that of individuals and whether their actions were harmful or not. I think that many laws are based on whether a person's actions are harmful to society or not. But some laws go, maybe overboard and try to change individual behavior, private behavior, and say, well, you can't do that because we think that's harmful for you. Well, that's none of your business. So,
Yeah, that's the problem.
and but you think you would expand the meaning of morality to include things that are neither harmful nor beneficial to society, because it's a matter of whether or not it is in
like
keeping
like
with
like what?
God's nature or not.
Like
So,
what?
what do you mean?
Like what's an example of something you would say that I call immoral, that
Oh,
that isn't immoral,
well,
right?
that depends on your particular brand of Christianity, but maybe cursing,
I mean,
using in fact blasphemous language when you are in the house by yourself.
well, children, we like I think
Would
until
that be
very
sorry?
recently,
Would that be an example or not? You're in the house by
yeah,
yourself and
I mean, you're
you're
cursing
committing
against
blasphemies.
like
Okay, that's
yeah,
not
like yeah,
immoral
it's
to me.
because it's not immoral to you to curse, right? But
No,
obviously, you've changed your mind because when you were Christian, you thought it was.
but that
Um,
wasn't a Christian.
but
Hold on, that wasn't a Christian thing because most Christians I knew cursed and didn't think there was anything wrong with that.
but again, you're missing it because you're doing this thing. You're always basing what's moral on what you've seen other Christians do. Like that's it's like saying, well, I saw
I
Saint
think
Paul killing
the
Christians.
vast
That
majority of
means
Christians in the history of the world have seen no problem with saying things like "damn" and "shit." It's just it's not a thing. It's a thing with a
well,
certain brand of Christian, but it's
I
not
don't
with
know
so
what you're trying
many.
to get at because you're are you asking about individual behavior or are you asking about like in
Well, you're
general
talking well.
what does the
In
Bible say about this?
look,
Because
so
I'm
here's the thing.
confused with
It's
that.
we've gone about an hour and 10 thereabouts.
20.
I think we should cut it off. Let's pick it up next week and focus. I said that we would do the other thing. We'll do it when we're done with this. Let's focus specifically on the question of moral epistemology.
I don't want to do that program because it's like again, it's like you just said, like there's no bridge, right? Because in a sense, if it's always like we're definitely in different planets because I don't just see it as localized to people, whereas you kind of do. You see it like I that's not my view of morality. It's not based on what is like
Okay,
yes,
but
there's a sense in which
you were accusing me
I'm not
of.
accusing you of anything.
Hang on, let me tell you what you're accusing me of before you're saying you're not. You're accusing me of getting the Christian ideas wrong and individualizing it when I say that the vast majority of Christians in the history of Christians have never seen any problem with saying certain words, and yet some Christians in some denominations do see a problem with it. That is a moral epistemology question because it is not enough to say that morality is about the will of God and so forth. I would say that even the Christians among themselves have no idea what the will of God is most of the time on most things. And in fact, if I were being completely honest, you don't have any idea of what the will of God is on anything at any point in time. And so that's why
Well,
a conversation on moral
I would
epistemology
I would
makes
challenge
sense.
everything you've said there. I would challenge the claim you made about a vast majority of Christians. I don't think you can back that up accurately. I would challenge the idea that Christians get their morality from looking at how other Christians are acting. That's not how we get our morality. We don't look at how other Christians are behaving and say, well, most Christians used to do this, so let's try and that's not how it works. And finally, like you asked, okay, what's something that you think is morally immoral? Like if I've had this conversation with Brian before, and we were talking about like, is it okay for someone to have racist thoughts and not act out on it? Like someone is just racist, right? But they're only racist in their mind. And the conclusion was that yeah, that's pretty immoral to have. It's immoral to have thoughts in your head that want, like even if you never act out on it, like you're a nice person, you help whatever, like that is still immoral. And the reason for that is because in a sense you're still causing harm. Using your definition, you're causing harm to yourself. You're poisoning yourself by having a bad thoughts pattern in your head. And in the same way, there are all sorts of activities that human beings do that may not make their way out into the real world that are immoral. It's not simply just about actions, and it's not simply about uh, benefiting society.
Okay, well,
It's also
none of
about
this
other
really
things.
matters since you don't want to have a conversation about moral epistemology. No Christian
I
ever
can
wants to have a
have it as a
conversation.
sidebar. I can have it as a side. No,
No
because you
Christian
just
ever
said no, no,
wants to
no.
have a conversation about moral epistemology.
Because you
It
said
just
it's
look it up on the
impossible
internet
to
and
have.
try to find them. You
No,
can't do
no,
it.
no, no, David, you're not being a very, very honest person right now, and I have to call you
Okay,
out on this
look,
because
people
you just went on a rant. You just went on a rant where you said it's impossible. Your
just throw it
Christians
up
are
on the
like this.
board. The
No,
famous conversation between atheist X and Christian X about moral epistemology. I'd
no,
love to see
because
it.
I can have a conversation about moral epistemology with someone else, just not you. You know why? Because I don't. You just went on a rant where you're saying a rant where you just said, "Oh, Christians are like this. You know, they can't. You can't build a bridge because they're always appealing to God. Whereas we're the realists. We're using what's actually real and all these other things. So we can't have that conversation until your mindset changes and you see that there's actually a way in which we can come together and agree on things, like we agreed at the beginning of the show about the Republican thing. But you're saying there's no way we can agree on that. So if there's no
I
way to
would say
agree
that
on that,
even
there's no
Christians cannot
point
agree on
in
moral
having.
epistemology.
Yes, we
So
can.
no,
Yes,
you
we can. So
can't. No, you
I'm
can't.
overruling. I'm overruling you
Okay,
right now
show
on the
me the
show.
example then. Put it on the board. I want to see some way that Christians have agreed on moral epistemology and how they know what is right and what is wrong, because it is just platitudes to say it is the will of God, as if there is some kind of very specific set of instructions and commands, this specific rule book, not the Bible, that has all of the things in it that's good and bad and right and wrong that Christians can agree on. It does not exist. And this is one of the reasons why Christians never want to have the conversation
Not
about
with
moral
atheists
epistemology.
who have already
They
decided. You've
don't
already
even have it
decided
with
in your mind.
themselves.
Look. Like I'm pretty much just fast forwarding to what you would say if we had this program next week or next month, because you've already decided in your mind it's
Fine,
impossible,
I will
but
be
you
glad.
still want
I will
to.
be
You
glad
still
to.
want to have it.
I'll be
No,
So
no,
part
because
of why part
what's
of
the
what I want
point
to
of
have.
us
Hang on,
spending 2 hours?
you wanted to talk about the inconsistency of my view. What you think is the inconsistency of my worldview and why it's unworkable. You don't mind talking about
I
that, but I can. But you don't want to face it when I point out the inconsistency of your
I
worldview and
would
your
be.
definition of morality.
I
You
would be
can't
more than
handle it.
happy.
You
No, I would be
can't
more than
handle it.
wait. Let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay.
I would be more than happy to spend 2 hours talking about how various Christians see this as wrong and other Christians see this as right. Can spend hours and hours and hours talking about that. The issue for me is I don't see how me and you talking about that is going to help you come to see my view better. That's what
Well,
I'm
is
saying.
that the
Because
only point? Because I have allowed you, not that I can allow you or
allowed,
not allow. Yeah,
allowed.
I retract that. I have endured you many times on the board and on podcasts attempting to poke holes in my
What you
epistemology to try to show that it is inconsistent. But when I suggest that we have a conversation about epistemology where both parties can engage in that, you don't want anything to do with it. And what I am saying is what you're walking away from and what people can see and hear right now is for you to have to sit on the firing line and hear and argue when I point out why your position is inconsistent and
I
unworkable. It is way
I
more inconsistent
no.
and way more unworkable
Well,
than anything that I
I'm
produced.
open. I'm listen. Just I'm open to just sitting here and listening to you talk about it. And if I have some, and if you're like, what do you think about that? I'll give my opinion. I'll give my view, but it's not because I'm afraid, like, like, like I'm afraid that you'll expose something about Christianity, and I'll be like, oh no.
It's already been exposed.
Okay, well then,
It's already
well,
there.
no, I'm just saying, in the sense of like the way I'm thinking about dialogue. The way I
Okay.
think about dialogue is that you have two people and they're trying to get to a common goal. But I don't see us coming to a common goal. So you're saying, okay, it has to be something else, like a common understanding of something. If you want to, like, you do it every day, you poke holes at Christianity every single day, and sometimes I respond and then you never respond back, and it's just left there. Like I found like a post from like last year that I wrote like like probably 3,500 words to, that you said, hey, I'm busy right now but I'll get back to this. And I get it, you never got back to it, but I can't say, oh, you're just running away from it, like
Dude,
you're
I
just
do a
saying like,
full time. I
why,
do a full
like I
time
would think
job.
we
I
know
do
each
about
other.
6 podcasts a week, and I write probably 2 to 3,000 words and comments on the board every week.
All
I'm
right,
not going
but
to get back to
I'm
everything.
not, you're not going to get back to
So,
everyone. Great. But I don't
it's-
think that it's right for you to say that I'm running away because, like, I'm scared that you're going to expose Christianity. Because
well,
how long have I
I do
been?
think you're being inconsistent even in that though, because you spent much of your time questioning to try to show, and I think unsuccessfully, to try to show that
Very
my
successful.
point of view on morality is inconsistent. And so when I suggest that we talk about moral epistemology proper, you're like, nope, can't do
No,
it.
because we're gonna do the true
Okay.
Christian thing where
Okay.
people have been bringing it up. They've been saying like, "Oh, how do you know someone's a true Christian?"
Okay.
Like, if you
Well,
want to do we can do moral epistemology, just not next week, because like we've already decided. And also, my I'll go back to what I said before, is that okay, if we're not gonna come to a conclusion that we both agree on, then that's unfortunate. But like that would be the reason for me not to want to do it. But I'll it's not like, okay, I'm pumped up to talk about why Presbyterians are like this and Baptists are like this, right? Unless I'm misunderstanding what you mean by how Christians don't agree on everything, right? You said we don't agree on anything, right?
I'm saying that your moral philosophy does not hold together when it comes to actual boots on the ground epistemology. It's just a philosophy and a theory that doesn't actually get you anywhere, and it doesn't get you a more consistent view of right and wrong than anything that I have promoted.
I would say it
And
does.
I can show that, but I'm sure that there will be plenty of commentary on the board. You don't have to. What I say that?
I won't read half of
I
them
don't know.
anyway
That's
because
okay.
like
I
half
know
the
you.
board is blocked.
It's fine. So what do you?
Yeah.
What did we say that we would talk about next week?
We're gonna talk about
I need to write
people
that
saying
down.
like, okay, yeah, yeah, sure, true Christian, like, oh, is someone a true Christian or not? Like, how do you
Oh yeah,
know if
yeah,
someone's a true Christian or not?
true Christianity.
Yes, true
Yeah,
Christianity.
yeah,
That's next week,
yeah.
God willing.
I'll.
And then if you want to talk about, because I also wanted like I feel like I've been slacking a bit on promoting videos, because like ever since I joined the show, like we've been doing your videos, except for the one time we did that abortion one, and I didn't even really want to do that one. So just, I don't know, just thinking ahead.
Well, I mean,
I
look,
have a
we
video
don't
in
have to
mind.
do this out loud, but you don't respond when I email you during the week. I don't hear from you, and so
I'm sorry,
I have
that's
to
my
put
bad.
together a show, and it's usually a late thing that I have to put
And
together
I
because I
have
didn't hear
to,
from you.
yeah, this is behind the scenes. Yeah, I have to be better with responding. Also, I'm kind of always preoccupied running from one thing to another, but that's not an excuse. But yeah, like next week, true Christian or not, because like I feel like that's such a touchy subject and people just get all sorts of worked up about it, and they're understanding me to be saying something that I'm not saying, and then they become just nasty people. They just become angry and abusive and all that. And hopefully, I don't know, maybe uh they won't after the show, or they'll even become even more so.
I've got a feeling that moral epistemology is going to sneak its way into that conversation anyway.
Right, it's going to either way, because all of this is about how do you know what's true and does it matter,
I
right?
plan to
That's what
bring it.
epistemology is. Like, does it matter if something is true or not? Like, if I lived in a desert tribe and I thought it was moral to go steal food from another culture, then then does that matter? Do my actions matter? Do those
We'll
no, that's the
we'll
stuff that
hash it
matters
out.
to talk about, right?
We'll
And
hash
like,
it out next week.
yeah, and my fear is that in secularism, especially modern secularism, it's come down like, well, I would never find myself in a situation like that. Like, it's never like, okay, let's talk about how some. It's always like, oh, I live in America. I could never do that, or something of that sort. Or like, oh, would you save the president who almost got assassinated? Well, I would want him to not be assassinated. Well, that's not really an answer, but okay. Um, and we don't even have time to talk about the assassination at all, because that would also fall into.
I honestly don't care about the assassination, but that's the assassination attempt. But that said, I did a show with Matt, part 2 of a series that we're doing. And in that show, if he doesn't edit them out, I say some very incendiary things about the assassination. So that'll come up in a few weeks, so people can hear it. But the truth of the matter is, in the grand scheme of things, I don't really care.
Well, that's a moral. That's a moral thing. Also, caring, not caring, that's a moral decision. Like, if you saw, yeah.
Well, I mean,
So I just
maybe
don't think
to
secularism.
you might think it's a moral decision. I don't
It is a
find
moral.
it. It's not a thing that I wake up in the morning thinking, oh my God, what does this mean for the world? I wake up thinking, am I going to make it to work?
On time,
I'm
right?
going to, and I'm thinking, all right, I've got this task, and this task. How am I going to order my day? I've got to go to the store afterwards. Got to get to the dog to the vet. The would be president got shot in the ear. Simply doesn't occupy any of that room in my head. I'm not
Right.
saying that the event is not significant. It's significant, but it's not something that I give a damn about on my
Well,
day-to-day life.
course
So
you
I can't
don't.
imagine doing a show about it. I mean,
so yeah, so that's again, you kind of like summarized why secularism. And I'm not just some secularists like listening to this. I'm like, oh no, well, I'm not like that. Well, I'm not saying you are. I'm not even saying this about you, David, but I'm just saying that secularism is very individualistic. And there's a sense in which being individualistic is good, but there's another sense which it can be very corrosive and bad for just for everyone involved,
okay,
including the person.
but that's only if you think that what I think about an assassination attempt even fits in the realm of morality. So
It does. It
that
does.
great,
Someone
it does for
nearly got
you.
murdered. Someone had
Someone
a
gets
bullet.
murdered every day, man. What
Right,
that doesn't
right, and those are
occupy
still
my.
wrong,
I
right?
sure, but
Yeah,
someone gets murdered every day. Lots of people
and
get
it's
murdered every day. I do not stop in the middle of work and think, oh my goodness, 5,000 people just got murdered.
you probably should.
No,
You
I
probably
shouldn't.
should.
I assure you, I shouldn't.
You probably you don't like, because that's where the question about the problem of evil comes from, because at some point you're like, until it hits you close, um and you're like, well, why is this happening? Is this just something that's a natural part of the universe? Like, we're just, is this like some joke, to some
Of
to the
course,
universe?
nobody thinks it's a natural part of the universe. It is obviously God's plan, because if there were any fewer murders, then we would end up in a worse world. And
No,
so, praise God for all the murders and
that's
for the
not.
assassination attempt of the
No,
president.
you're
I
you're
don't know what
misrepresenting.
we're.
Nope. Even though I'm not a Molinist, I know you're I know you're misrepresenting it, and I wouldn't
I
go
am
to
not
bat for
misre. There's
Molinism,
no
but
way to
you're
misrepresent Molinism. I don't. I think if you'd have to work pretty hard to misrepresent that, because it is literally everything that happens is the best possible world, and that is why in a totally free world where we could change something that God has ordained to happen, it would create a worse world. Literally can't misrepresent that.
okay. Well, then that's not what I believe at all.
Okay, I
So
know that, but
that
I know you're not a
characterization is not right.
Molinism. I
Right, but
understand
then
that,
but then the
but
thing
you
is
are
that
a
someone.
predestinationist.
I don't even know what that means. But what the main issue, and then we'll wrap up, obviously, because you have to go. Is that someone nearly got murdered on live television? And some people, I've seen some people like, oh man, only a few inches and democracy would be saved, or apathy in your case, or people are like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, and it's like, what is the actual
I don't
cause
think Trump
that we are?
dying. I don't think Trump dying would save democracy. But let me put it a different way. I don't think Trump being shot to death
Would
as a
it, would it
political
would
act
it have,
would save democracy.
would
Furthermore,
it have
I'm
been
not.
moral though? No, right?
Yeah,
Immoral.
I don't think that. It, I will say what I say in my language. Um, I don't think that Trump being assassinated would save democracy. I do think democracy hangs in a balance. And in fact, in some ways, democracy has been dead for a while. There are many institutions of our democracy that are simply non functional or functional in a way that is no longer representative of a good, healthy body politic for people. So one person being shot doesn't save it. Unlike Putin, I think that if you had the kind of revolution in Russia that could happen if Putin were gone, that could, in fact, help Russia. I don't think that that would help us because what we have is an infection that runs deep in our society and culture, and it is bigger than one person. It is way bigger than one person. And if Trump gets out of line with his base, his own his own base could assassinate him.
No,
This
but
is
come on.
This is bigger than Trump, and Trump doesn't know it. So I just don't see any way that a Trump assassination helps this situation at all for either side.
Well, the person who wanted him dead obviously did. It made sense.
He was also
Made
most
sense
likely
to them.
mentally deranged. He was a registered Republican, and we don't know why he did it. We have no insight into
Well,
his motive.
well, we can't, but we can speculate on why some white people would do that. It's the oldest trick in the political book where someone registers as the opposite party so that the person that they don't want to win, they'll vote for someone else in the primaries that they may win. Well, anyway, all that is minutia, but like the main point is this: like that kid thought that he was going to like save the country, whatever.
I
And he's
did,
gonna
you don't
save.
know that. You don't know. You don't know that.
Okay, we don't know. Okay, let me
Mhm.
speculate and say that he probably thought that he was doing a good thing by killing Trump, the same way someone can think it's a good thing to kill Putin. Uh, and so when he fires that bullet, and he's like, in his mind, he's like, okay, I'm going to save America from this tyrant. So
You're
is it?
reading into it too much. He may
But
have been hopped up on coke and thought that by killing Trump he would go straight to heaven, and he may not have had any political calculation at all. Uh,
no,
y-
no, no.
well, no. You can't say that. We don't know that. We have access to some of his social media accounts, which have apparently revealed nothing. We have access to his Android phone. It was an Android phone, some Samsung something or other. But other than the fact that the guy was an Android user, we have no insight into what was there. I think they probably found nothing. I think that's why we're hearing nothing. There's nothing to be found, and so there's also nothing to be gained by speculating his motives as if he had some kind of particular intent. We don't know what his intent was, other than that he took a shot at the presidential candidate, and that's as
So
far as our
intense.
speculation should go.
So intents do play a part in morality in some way or form, some
I,
way, shape, or form.
I don't know how
I'm
you
just
got that from
asking.
what I just
I'm
said.
just
I don't
asking.
know how you got there, and so
No, I'm just asking. Just you're
I'm
not
not
gonna
gonna
answer.
re-engage the show.
Okay.
I I simply said, and I reiterate, we can't know or even have any grounds to speculate on what he was trying to do. But he is dead. And so I don't need to speculate on what he was trying to do. He didn't do it. The president wasn't shot. I mean, he wasn't killed.
He was shot.
He was grazed. And I think that things will pretty much go on as they will, except for the fact that he will win by even a bigger margin than what he would have. And I think the possibility of some crazy Republican retaliating against a Democrat is very high. So I do worry about that. But otherwise, I worry more about the price of a gallon of lactate milk, because that affects me considerably more than this assassination attempt did. When the mob broke into the Capitol, that was an event that concerned me because they were out for blood. All of Congress was gathered there. That represented a major break in a democratic process and intent. That changed America from the kind of country that had peaceful elections and transfer of power to one that didn't. And I don't think we've ever quite recovered from that. And so you could say that maybe this is a leftover from that, the fact that we are no longer a country that can boast a peaceful transfer of power. And I don't know that that is ever going to come back, or at least in my lifetime.
Okay. Well, I'm just mostly concerned with the transcendental issues involved in these sorts of incidents, and not mainly whether the kid was bored that afternoon and decided it would be cool to kill the president or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no way to know. You can't interrogate him. He's dead. We can only interrogate the stuff that he had, and that apparently has not led us to any kind of conclusions.
Well, that's from your perspective, but
well, no, that's okay. No. Hang on. How is that my perspective? Do you have some information that I don't have?
I'll post it on the board because time is out. But like the guy was a registered Republican, like you said, but he was not like a pro-Trump supporter. He was very, according to his own friends, he was very liberal. Like he had very liberal.
Believe it or not, there are liberal Republicans out there too. For instance, I mean, there are liberal Republicans that I don't know what you glean from that. The Republic let me refer you to today's short. Praise Waheguru. So the fact that he was liberal.
You can't be a liberal anyway. No, I feel like I'm trying to take this bigger, and you're making it. Even when we agree, you still want us to disagree.
No, we don't. There's no
bigger. Even when we agree, you want us to disagree.
There's no bigger. You talked about the transcendental issues. There's no transcendental issue. A person took a shot at the president and mostly missed. There's no transcendental issue, and we can't even speculate on his causes. I would love to discuss this guy's frame of mind and how he got there. We don't even know it.
It's impossible to ever know.
Yes, it is impossible to ever know unless you have some information that no one else does. I don't know what spinning your wheels over it is going to get you. You can't know what he was doing.
Okay. Well, you're wrong, but that's fine.
Well, tell me what he was doing. Tell me how you know. But give me your epistemology on anything.
No, because I can't tell you, because you've already said it's impossible to know because the guy's dead. The only way we can know is if we interrogate him, but we can't interrogate him because he's dead. We can't look at what we can't ask. No, because you're being very dishonest right now, because here's the thing. You're hold on. You're saying the only way to know is if we talked to the guy, but he's dead. We can't ever know by looking at what he had on his phone. You said there was nothing on his
Yes.
phone, which is not true. And then you said, "Oh, well, the cops interviewed his friends who had insights to give." You're saying, "Well, that still doesn't help us point the picture." Like he could have just been like walking around, decided, "Hey, there's a rally going on. I'm just going to try and kill the president." Like we can't ever know for sure ever because it's impossible because he's dead. The only way to know for sure is if we talk to him.
Okay.
Well, that's your epistemology.
One more
That's
time.
your
No, no,
epistemology.
no. One more time.
And it's
What information do you have that would give insight into his motive? I've asked
just
for this.
told
What,
you. I just told you that he let his friends say that he was very liberal, and you're saying like, no, no, no. Like Republicans are,
well,
liberal
I don't
because
understand. I don't
someone
understand this
prayed at the
connection.
RNC.
What
Well,
is
you made a
liberal? What
connection
does
with this
liberal have?
thing
Hang on. What does
with
liberal
the
have to
RNC,
do?
someone praying. Like you just
Are
made
you
that big
saying that if
connection.
you're no, hang on, if you're liberal, you want to kill the president?
That's not what I said. No,
Then
I'm
I
just
don't
saying that
understand. Then how does
because
that play? How does that play into a motive?
let me explain it,
Okay.
okay? Because you're saying, oh, he was a registered Republican, and I countered that by saying being a registered Republican doesn't automatically mean that you support Trump. It could mean like, especially in a
And
state
I
like
countered
Pennsylvania.
that by saying being a liberal doesn't mean that you're against Trump. What's your point? How
And I'm
does
I'm getting to the point, but you keep interrupting and making all these speeches. Being a registered Republican doesn't necessarily mean that you support even the Republican Party, because there's a known practice, old as the oldest thing you can think of, where some people register for the opposite party and they vote for the second place guy because they don't want the first place guy to win. In this case, you would vote for Trump's opponent in the primary because you don't want him to win. But that you can't do that because he already got the nomination. He's like so far ahead of everyone else. That's my point. And you're saying like, oh, he was a Republican, and so that like you're just seeing things linearly in one specific way. And then you say, well, we can never know. We can never know for sure what it is that what he wanted to do because um, he's dead. And I'm saying like, no, that's not true. We can always find more. We could interview his friends. We could interview his parents. We could look into stuff he put on the internet and see what he was thinking. And you're saying, well, that still doesn't paint the full picture.
no?
Fine. That's your
That's not
epistemology.
what I said. What I said was we have done all of that, and we still have not gotten
We
any
are still
information.
doing that. You're speaking like you work for the FBI, but the investigation is still ongoing. They're going to release a report later on in the year, and they're gonna like interview like all sorts of people and be like, okay, this is why he
Well,
did it.
when
You're
they
saying
do,
that's already been done.
when they do, we can talk about motives. But right now, you're just speculating with your fantasy scenario of why
Not
he did
fantasy.
it.
I've used things that people have already put out,
For
like his
instance,
friends.
I could say that he was very supportive of Trump ideally, and he was a very strong Republican, but he thought in his warped mind that if he assassinated Trump, it would so fire up the Republican base that we would get even more conservatives, not just in the White House, but through Congress, the courts, and we would have a long age of the reign of political conservatism
That
thanks to
makes
this
no
one act.
sense.
Makes all kinds of sense.
Zero sense. Like that doesn't even come
Okay.
close to making sense.
But, well, I wouldn't even speculate it because we don't have any reason to any more than you have any reason to. So this is,
Yes,
I
I
mean,
literally like I always do this. Someone will challenge me on the show, and then I'll post on the board, and then no, the person won't they won't
okay, well,
respond.
you
And
have,
then I'm gonna do
I've
this for
asked you,
this one, and then you won't respond. So that's my prediction.
okay. Well, if you've got some because what you just said, no one's denying. They have questioned his friends. They have we've gotten whatever quotes from interviews. I could tell you what the news media has said because I do keep up from time to time with some things like this. We can talk about what they have or haven't found on his phone or social media, and to my knowledge, they've come out with nothing at all. So
To your knowledge, yeah. To your knowledge, yeah.
So I, if you won't tell me what new insights you can bring to the table now, but you want to wait to post something on the board, can't wait to see it.
No, because that's the only way that I can get y'all to accept what I'm saying. Because like I'll say something and then someone will just dart out that I'm lying, and then I'll post it on the board. I'll tell, like I've done this a few times. I've said, okay, I'll post it on the board, and then you can interact with it there. And then I'll post it, and then the person who made the claim won't even be close to being anywhere
Okay,
near
okay. Let me.
responding to it.
This is
You're
just
one of those people too.
this is just for comedic value. But one more time, what do you know about this guy's motives that has been publicly made known that
I
I
didn't
apparently
say
don't know? What do you
anything.
know?
You said they didn't find anything on his phone. That's not true. They
They
did
haven't
find a
found
search history
they
on
haven't
his
found
phone.
anything helpful with regard to a motive.
Changing what you're saying.
That's okay. So did they find something helpful with regard to a motive?
I just said, you're not listening. I just said they're going to publish a detailed report.
Okay, so
But
you
from
don't know
what
of
it
anything that
reads,
they found that
yeah,
would.
you don't care about the truth, bro. Like, okay,
I
you're
don't care about the truth.
interrupting
I'm
me.
trying to
No,
ask you
and I'm
because
trying to answer, and you're
okay.
interrupting.
So
Here we go
what
again.
about the
All right.
motive did they find on the phone?
Here we go again. All right. They're going to publish a detailed report about this guy and why he did and how he managed to get up there, right? Why he, like, they're going to do that, okay? But at the moment, information is coming out about this guy from his friends, people who knew him, who says that
Right?
he didn't like Trump. That's what people are saying, people who knew him. And you're saying because he's dead, we can't know what he really wanted. Maybe he was just bored that afternoon. That could be a valid reason, or it could be this other reason, or that other reason. Because the guy's dead, we can never know for sure.
Look, I don't look. He may have liked Trump. He may not have liked Trump. I don't. Is that a motive for murder? I don't like Trump.
Of course, it can. Like if you hate someone and you think he's a
I
threat
hate
to
Trump.
democracy.
I
Okay,
hate
but
Trump.
you just said you don't think he's a
I
threat to
hope he chokes
democracy.
on a chicken bone and dies in a fire. I hate Trump. I'm not going to shoot
So
him.
you want to? Okay, you hope he dies. You hope he dies.
I
right?
hope he dies badly, painfully, and for a long time.
Right. And there's someone, this kid also wanted Trump dead, but for him, it was through a bullet in the head.
I
So
probably
what
want
is
Trump.
the
I
difference
probably want
between the
Trump to
both of
die
them?
even more. but that said,
Wow.
that in and of itself isn't
I hope
motive
you
for
don't
murder.
get a visit from the FBI.
I hope
or-
I do.
Anyway, I hope
Boy,
you
what a
don't.
show that would be.
But
Bring it, FBI.
the issue
I mean,
though
what?
is
Look, I hate
just
Putin
so-
too. There are people that I hate. Whoever's the dictator in fucking North Korea, hate them too. Hope they drop dead. Maybe they have and we don't know it. There are lots of people who need to drop dead in
Including
this
Trump.
world.
including Trump, right? And that's the
I
problem right there.
personally despise Donald Trump, and there are millions who do, but none of us took a shot at him. And so
Right,
I'm
because
simply
thankfully,
saying
like,
that
it's
being, but the idea that you're not a Trump supporter, that you are, maybe you're apolitical or maybe you just don't like Trump for whatever reason, is not in itself some motive to commit an assassination. Now, I think the bigger story in all of this is not so much that guy, but the failure in the Secret Service. And there's been some information that's come out about the failures in the Secret Service that possibly allowed for this thing in the first place. I think that's a far more interesting story than what we
Right.
don't know yet on this guy. Now,
But then
you think that you have enough information to speculate about this guy's motive, and my epistemology says let's wait and see what the evidence shows.
No,
You're
I
like,
literally said let's wait for the detailed report, and oh my goodness, I even told you, I've said it at least 5 times that let's wait. The detailed report is gonna come out, but I said in the meantime,
you started
this
this
is
by
what
speculating on the
is-
motives. and
right.
talking about the transcendental
You're
realities
not
of it.
you're not yeah, because because you were saying, well, I don't care that Trump almost died because I have to take care of my dog and I have to do all these things, and I'm saying, okay, well and good for you, because that's what secularism is about. It's about you mainly, right? Your happiness, your flourishing. When you have enough time to care about the rest of the world, you'll get to that when you get to it. But first you got to take care of yourself, and you don't have enough time to think about other people. First you got to look out for yourself. That's what humanism is, right? And I'm saying, okay, well and good, that's your worldview. But then you can't but you can't take that worldview and juxtapose it to other people and say, well, y'all are stupid because you don't live life like this, or you don't see things the way I do.
First, not a worldview. Second, I don't. You can't take how I live my life and think about world issues and paste that on all people who are not religious. That's ridiculous.
Never
That's, in
said you
fact,
could.
I would dare say that's stupid.
Never said that because I just said it's individual just to you, right? It's just based on how you see things. So I always say this, that secularism cannot be, it can't even be called properly like an entire, like a worldview. It can't even be called that because
I'm the one who
it's
says that.
always different based. I also say that, so we agree on something, because it's always based on a specific individual. So I can't even criticize properly what you believe, because you have like, your beliefs are so specific and tailor-made to you that they can't extend past to your neighbor who's also an atheist. Like, they're just for you and you alone. And that's the issue
Yeah,
that I bring up
that's weird
all the
because
time.
I live in a community that is probably the best community of people I've ever lived around, who are very considerate of everyone else. There's no litter on the ground. Um, there are no excessive noises, and yet somehow we are all interested and concerned about our individual needs.
Well,
What you're
that's
saying is bankrupt.
contradictory
What you're
there.
saying is bankrupt and devoid of any practical real world truth.
Well,
But look,
are your
that
neighbors secularists? No, they're not.
we are an hour after the time when I wanted to end the show. So
Okay, okay.
I'm going to end it at this point, and we will continue next time. And I will see you on the board and through various shorts, and we will hash it out some more until next time. Well, hey, Guru!
Wow.
I'm out.